Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the LaunchDay Shorts podcast. I'm your host, Dean Cvetkoski, a.k.a. WhoDean. Today in studio, we've got an absolutely brilliant woman by the name of Gry Stene, and she's honestly just blown me away with most of the conversations that we've had so far. It's actually been so entertaining, so fulfilling as well, meeting another person that's a bit of a creative like me, and knowing that I'm not the only person out there that has the same type of brain that I have, right? It's really good. Gry, how are you going today?
Too bad. It's a bit warm here in Perth, but apart from that, I was sitting outside and working this morning. I've moved inside now for this.
Yeah, good. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And you know what? I love the green going on. Green's actually my favorite color. So I
Yeah.
love the plants. I love the dress. I think it accentuates your radiant smile. I'll tell you that for sure. So it's good. Just a little. Just a little. Well, look, Gry, tell me one thing. I know a little bit about, the things that you're doing now, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey leading up to where you are today. I mean, so where did everything start for you? What was it like growing up? Like, I'd love, just give me the highlights, what are we looking at?
You're asking me to do highlights. I use a lot of words. Listen, I was born just about 100k south of the Arctic Circle in Norway, into this really loud and boisterous family. We were all encouraged to be ourselves, our own unique selves, and there was no topic that was off the table. And I thought that's what the world was like.
I love that.
Understood it's not necessary.
Yeah.
But we moved around quite a bit when I was little because my parents were young teachers, and plus my dad had a bit of a love-hate relationship with alcohol. So we had to move to a new school every year almost. But
Right.
That's all right. That sort of shapes you. I'm the oldest of 4 kids in total. And, when I was 5.5, my parents split up, and I'd already lived in a number of different places. I went to 3 different schools in my first year at school, but we settled in the south of Oslo, in a place called Vikane, which was like sort of the place where all the rich people from Oslo would come for their summer holidays. They would have their summer cottages. We lived there in a 100-year-old house that my stepdad inherited from his grandparents. But it was a wonderful country upbringing by the ocean. I know that's not what people think of with Norway, but we have lovely summers. They're just not as hot or as long as here.
Yeah.
And then when I was 13, my mom and stepdad decided to take us away from materialism and have us experience something new. So we moved to Botswana in Africa.
Oh, wow.
Where I lived from I was 13 till 15. Amazing years, amazing learning. Getting up during the holidays, we'd go for safaris. We went to Okavango Del, to the Kalahari Desert. We went to South Africa. I was absolutely horrified because I was the only white student at my school, and I got to South Africa, and they had the blankes and non-blankes. This is in 76, right? Giving away my age then maybe. But the whites and non-white chairs in the big shopping centers, and it was and just the things that I heard when all my friends were black and local Botswana people, but awakened my interest in science, technology, engineering, maths, and because I won this. I was in a science club, and we made this is before internet, long time before internet, and we made, based on a book, we created like a solar cooker out of cardboard and alfoil, and we showcased it at the annual fair, cooking eggs and bacon and things like that. So I always knew that I'd end up doing something in that sort of, creative tech space, if you like. Although I did want to become a doctor. When I didn't get admitted the first year into med school, I went, what else can I do? And I just had this epiphany that tech would be my underpin everything. So I ended up studying technology or computation in Manchester. And that's kind of how that started. Not like today when you can select subjects. We had some very, very dreary, boring professors there, but I stuck with it and basically lived my life in tech for the last 35 years, using it primarily.
So about since you were born, right?
About since I was born, yes. But since I was in my
You were
20s.
crawling around tech. Yeah, I get it. No, I'm with you completely.
And the funny thing is, we laugh at that because we sort of think that tech is new, but it's not that new. And if we look back at, the 40s, the first ever, and I thought we were at the forefront of something really cool with having more women in tech. Because it was about 15% when I started and about 35-40% women in key roles in tech. But it's gone downhill since then, and that's like so tragic. But if you look back over time, the first ever recognized programmer was actually Ada Lovelace in the 1840s.
Yeah, wow.
And then during I guess the 40s and 50s in the US, the human computers, if you like, were actually women, specifically women of color at NASA. So they put man into orbit around Earth and sent them to the moon. So
yeah, wow.
Anyway, so that sort of leads into a little bit of what I love to do, to try to create opportunities and elevate women in tech as creators and as drivers of new tech, because we do need to have a community of tech creators that are representative of the people that we serve and the communities we serve.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, right? Because there is, there's always going to be, disparities in I suppose how many men are in a particular role, how many women are in a particular role. Why do you think, actually, just while we're here, I mean, why do you think that, tech has become less attractive for women?
That's a really good question. I actually started doing a PhD on that until I realized that academia is a little bit too narrow focused.
Yeah, fair enough.
But what I found in my pre-candidacy research, which was much broader and much more my space, was that it has a lot to do with identity and belonging, and it has to do with intersectional challenges. And I don't know if you're aware of intersectionality, but it basically...
Not at all.
And so intersectionality, in summary, means that we all have different perspectives or experiences of what oppression and discrimination means. So just because I'm white and a woman, it doesn't mean that I experience everything in the world the same as another white woman. We also know that, so the research originated from the US in the late 80s on intersectionality theory, which was really looking at what it's like to be a Black woman compared to being a Black man or compared to being a white woman. It's quite profound, and that's one of the key elements to it. But identity and belonging, girls here, one of the things that I found was that in 2018 research, there was only 8% of all the kids across all the OECD countries that were interested in a career in ICT-related career. And out of girls, there was only 1%. But you went to Australia, it was negligible.
Wow.
No girls, no 15-year-old girls were interested in it. And my take on this is that you get to about 14, 15, and the important thing is your friends. And if your friends aren't doing those things, then you'll go and do, you might become an influencer on TikTok, which is also tech, but it's not necessarily in that tech creation space. This is why some
correct. You're utilizing, you're becoming consumer of the tech, not the creator.
Yeah, but you're a creator, but not a tech creator necessarily. But you can still do it, and it's a lot around building those.
Totally. And I get it. I mean, there's always going to be disparities on, like I said, disparities between men and women in different roles. I mean, you look at how many women take up bricklaying jobs. Yeah, not many, right? And it
has to do with role models as well. I do want to say that, because if you often do what people around you do, right? So and it's not because of the strength, I can tell you that much, because have you ever seen how much a nurse lifts? And there's a lot more female nurses than
heaps. Heaps. I have seen them. I've seen exactly what they need to do on a day-to-day basis. The amount of stress they put themselves through is ridiculous. Absolutely.
So there you go.
Absolutely.
But I guess to me it's not just about women. Although, there's 50-50 or 51% women in Australia, about 50% globally. So it's a good place to start if you're starting to look at equity or equality of opportunity, I kind of like to call it, of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Belonging is a huge thing for me. So I do work with both men and women, but it's kind
That's awesome. So how how do you get more women into tech? What is it exactly that you need to do to get more of them into it? How do we normalize the stereotypes where it's not, tech is a job for women as well? And I do feel like that the uptake on women in scientific technology is higher than anything to do with ICT type technology, programming, things like that. How do we drive more women into technology?
I think first of all we have to start a lot earlier, like in kindergarten, right? And
Yeah,
about
okay.
being aware of the role models and all that sort of stuff. But so if you look at the global picture, in India you have about 50% women in in ICT studies, right? Here it's like 15, still the same as it was when I actually think it's less going into that. There is also a perception that tech is about programming. Tech is not about programming. We need really diverse teams. We have designers, we have subject matter experts, we have QA people, all these kind of different roles that women do extremely, extremely well. Customer service, but it's kind of, there is a perception around tech that you're not you're a geek. I call myself a geek whisperer, by the way.
Me too. I'm a geek through and through. Believe me, I get called a geek almost 3 times a day. Believe 100%.
But I guess to me, it's always been that thing about being that bridge and creating a more connected world where we celebrate differences and everybody feels welcome, valued, and inspired to do good. So that's kind of my driver for all the things that I do. And I don't just work. So I do coaching of women. I have an online community. We specifically work with women who are in tech or want to be in tech, or who have been in tech and want to give back. And so it's really on the sort of cusp of taking off. It's kind of been there on the back burner for a while. Well, this is what I'm doing. What do you think of it? So I kind of fell into that sort of, who am I to think that I can do something like this? And
look, it's a common conversation I have with a lot of people on the podcast is, everyone goes through like a bit of an imposter syndrome, a bit of an identity crisis. That's a normal part of being in business, a normal part of life as well, absolutely.
And I think another area that has been a big one for me was that I only recently realized that I was totally traumatized after I left an organization that I've been volunteering for a long time. I was like ingrained in this organization for 5 years. And then I realized that, hang on, if I'm going to build my own business, I can't spend 30 hours working for free for them. So I stepped away and I left that organization, and I thought I was absolutely fine, onwards and upwards and all that sort of stuff. And then I suddenly realized that I had lost my tribe. And that is almost like losing a family member or losing your family. So it's kind of serious trauma there. So I'm kind of just working through that myself, but sharing that story because I think it's a story that a lot of people experience. I was just chatting with a friend today who has been through serious cancer and that survival story, but then the survival of the survivorship of survival itself is like coming back into things, because then she's not able to work anymore, and then she's lost her tribe, right? So it's you're not the same person that you were. I'm definitely not the same person I was in my 20s.
I can
even if it's only 5 years ago.
Love it. I love it. I completely concur with you because, even for me, so I went through divorce, and then almost exactly a year later, I actually had a stroke. And then same thing for me is that the last 2 years have been a massive identity crisis, imposter syndrome. I've lost my tribe too, right? So the people that I would normally, sort of market to, hang out with, they'd be my people. It's very, very different now than what it would have been 2 years ago. So, I completely concur with you. And I think, what I really appreciate about this conversation is the vulnerability, because what's going to happen is, there's a lot of people that are going to be watching right now as we're speaking. Not literally, we're not live, but they're going to be watching the video afterwards. They're going to watch this video afterwards, right? Humor is my coping mechanism. So I'm pretty sure you picked up on that. But, they're going to be watching this, and they're going to be saying to themselves, you know what, I feel exactly the same way. And this is good. It's a really good that, you and I are having this discussion and this conversation about, about identity and things like that, because it is more common and it's probably less spoken about. And I would say that it also challenges some of the current stereotypes faced with women going into into tech as well, because it does have to do with identity. Is that really me? Is that really the type of person that I am? And I think even from a feminine concept where a lot of women have their maternal instincts that come into play as well. I think that also plays a role in some of their decision making too. Would I be correct in saying that? I mean, I'm not a woman, right? So I can't really. I'm speculating.
You don't have the exact lived experience. That first of all, like I like to. I talk a lot about feminine strengths, but feminine strengths are not exclusive to women. There are men who have feminine strengths, and in actual fact, when men exhibit feminine strengths, they're seen as a great leader. If a woman does it, such as collaboration and communication and all that sort of stuff, it's she's not strong enough. But let's leave that on the side.
Very interesting.
My feminine self. So I do think that there are feminine strengths there. You know what? I'm going to have to ask you to ask that question again because I went off on a tangent. That's my
no. That's all right. You and I are both on the same wavelength. I would have done the exact same thing to you if you did it to me. So that I would have said the exact same thing. Can you just tell me the question again? No, I love that. Totally. So where I was talking about was I was appreciating the fact that identity is a very key and important role in day-to-day life for everyone that's watching. But then I also went on to talk about potentially how identity and belonging may be a concept that does present certain challenges for that stereotype of women going into tech. Do you know what I mean?
Or in any male-dominated industry as well, but it's kind of. But you were also, and it's just come back to me. You were also talking about that, not having the lived experience of being a woman, but women juggle career, care, and community much more than men do. I know that there are a few good men that step up to the challenge and actually do that, but we are carers at home, and I don't actually have children myself, but I do have four-legged children, fur babies, and I have my partner, but then I've got my siblings back in Norway and his sister, and so I'm always doing care with my friends and all that sort of stuff, which women just take to it naturally because we've watched that. That's also about role models, but I also do think there is a biological drive to it as well. But I think the workplaces, so some of the work that I do, I try to work with organizations to create those more inclusive workplaces where it's okay to, COVID has been a double-edged sword, right? Because now we know that some people actually work really well from home, and wasting an hour on the way to and from work is not a good thing. More often than not, it's the mom that picks up the children does the pick up and drop off. I know that it's not everywhere, but in a lot of cases it is.
I know for me, it's I'm usually the one to do drop-offs and stuff like that.
Yeah, so. and I know there are, because and it depends on the flexibility of the parent and all that sort of stuff. But quite often, and there's a really interesting piece of research in Norway. So my baby sister, my 50-year-old baby sister, she has 4 children. But she said there was research done there in terms of how much a man does, the dads do in the home, and it came out about 50-50.
Oh, but wow, really?
Big difference was in planning. So planning the doctor's appointments, planning the going to the sports things, planning the what they're going to take to school, all those kind of things. The men did very, very little of. So it's kind of an interesting one.
I'm out. You got me. You got me. I'm with you completely.
So it was really interesting research, because I think that there is, there's definitely, changes from when I was a kid, as one should hope it was.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's just that constant juggle of priorities for women, and it's like in the tech industry in particular, and in some other industries, there's an expectation that you work 12-hour days, and a lot of the women do. But I remember being at a Women on Boards conference back in 2012, I think it was. And the speakers, there was a sort of a roundtable with the head of Commonwealth Bank and the head of like a country type Foxtel kind of thing, and they were talking about, I love it. Women work so much harder. They work half. They work 60% or 80%, and they really do a great job. And then one grandmother stood up and she said, "So do you think that's fair?" that they're doing more work than the men, and then they get paid for 60%. And he just went like, whoa. And it is interesting because that's the way that we see how to juggle it. We actually do a smaller job, but then like one of my volunteers in It Girls Rock, which is my online community, she is about my age. She had children when we were working together about 20 years ago, and she would come home, do dinner, spend time with the kids, and then because she was in Canada and a lot of us were over here, then she'd get on the call with us at nighttime, and she'd be working till 12 o'clock. So she was still working like absolute full time, but she was taking those breaks in between. Anyway,
yeah,
I can get on a huge soapbox in terms of tailoring or creating or fostering those inclusive cultures that actually are cognizant of those added things of, not just for women, but of trauma, of having kids, of not having kids. As a woman, it's not to have kids either, right? So it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. That juggling of all these priorities. Elder care, huge one for people my age. I've just moved really far away from my elders.
Yeah. Do you think that there's still like a gender pay gap today? I know this is going to be a hot take.
Massive.
This one.
The gender pay gap is huge. I only have Australian numbers. I think it's 15% in Australia, and I think it's 24% in WA.
Okay. And then what's
and do you know the definition of gender pay gap?
Yeah. So is the pay gap calculated at earnings, or is it calculated at hours at work? Like, or based on the hourly
the pay
rate?
gap is purely pay, and it's the average salary that women take, that women earn versus the average salary that men earn. So it's not. It's actually illegal to pay somebody different salaries.
Yeah, that's the argument, right?
The same job.
The entire world has that argument. Jordan Peterson talks about it. We've had a couple of people, Australians, that talk about it on today's show, things like that. So there's a lot of talk about that topic, right? Yeah. And so this is actually probably a good opportunity to clarify, what the purpose behind that gender pay gap, I suppose, campaign is about. Because you're right. So it's illegal to pay, for the same role, pay people two different salaries, right? You can't have one paid less and et cetera and so on. But obviously, there's always going to be negotiations, things like that. But from just a general concept, no, you can't pay a woman less than a man for the same job, right? So So what would you say is probably the primary driver for that campaign for that gender pay gap? Like, what are people fighting for in that campaign, if that's illegal to do?
So do you think it's fair that a nurse earns less than a welder?
Well, to be honest, I don't get into those details, right? I don't get into those details.
That's what it's about. It's actually showcasing. So my understanding, this is my perception of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Is that we're just showcasing that some of the roles that women are in get paid less, and a lot of them are government or roles. So there are other, some people could say advantages with it, that you have maybe more flexibility and more understanding in those, more security. But it turns out, and I've seen some really cool research recently, job security is not that high on the women's, but work-life balance is huge on the women's. Higher pay is more for the men. This is in a specific jurisdiction, but equivalent to Australia. So
I think generalizing that concept is pretty standard, I think, because it makes a lot of sense, right?
But the gender pay gap is really about, so if you do, and one of my friends is a money educator, a financial educator, and I had to do her presentation once, and I was absolutely flabbergasted because she did, let's say you finish you finish school at 21, you start working at an average salary of $50,000 at that time, and then we do normal sort of projection of that. By the time retirement age, I think she had 67, the woman has earned 600,000 less than the man, right? But also the super is less. Then add that maybe she had 2 children, so that's an average, and then it stagnates. And that was just in Australia. In WA, it was even more horrendous. So women in WA have who have been working since super was introduced in the 90s. They are still 33% less in super than men.
Do you think, like, if we start standardizing, because I think there's a whole world of contributing factors into all of this, right? Like, let's look at childcare, right? It costs, like, obviously both my kids are in school now, but childcare was $120 a day.
Yeah.
Plus, and then take the government subsidies away, so on, so on, so on. So then, for a business to be profitable but then also employ, more people, utilize that funding to grow, to scale, to employ more people. You just, like, if a welder's getting paid $40 an hour, it's obviously, for me, I look at it like a supply and demand issue. Obviously with childcare, there was that issue with supply and demand. Wages did increase. But prior to that, it was kind of like, well, this isn't profitable if we are paying them the same as a welder. Whereas, the welders there's not as many of them, that take on that role. It's very labor intensive. I'm not fighting for anyone. I'm just kind of putting what my position and understanding of it is. And so then, yes, they get paid more. There's more risk associated with that job. I'm not going to compare a welder with a nurse because there's equal risk there. But, let's look at child carer versus welder. I don't know. Do you feel like potentially that if there was standardizing in pay gaps between a welder and a child carer, would you say that that's kind of moving more into like government socialism?
I do think that there is a social element to it, because a lot of the roles that women or a democratic or social or government think to some of these things, because a lot of the roles that many women do, so childcare, teaching, nursing,
very important things, by the way.
Absolutely essential for current and future generations, right?
Absolutely.
But they are generally federal or state or local government, right? Okay. So there needs to be some sort of equilibrium there. Some teachers earn decent money, but they have to be quite high up, and it's very difficult for women to get into that. I believe not, and this is hearsay. I don't have the numbers around this, but there are a lot fewer women as principals than there are men, certainly in secondary school. Yeah, although there are a few, and they've fought their way there. But I'm not going to say, like in Norway we had a quota for a government, 40% women. Should be 50 if you ask me, but because it should be representative. But then again, some of the people who step in there, I don't know if I kind of quite agree with either, but it should be representative of everything. So then I do like targets of getting people in, but I also think that one of the things that, if I look at tech or at mining resources, I'm in Perth after all, there is a lot of drive in the bigger companies to get more women into leadership positions, and that's all good, but you do need to support them.
So can I ask, right? So like, because where I stand, okay, look, and to be fair, majority of my staff are women, right? So as far as disparities go for me, I probably favor women more than I favor men, right? So big up.
They do the job differently, right?
Absolutely, right? So, but like even in saying that and taking that into consideration, I don't look at the disparities in genders and pay, pay equality between industries. Look, if I'm being totally honest, I don't give a fuck. Like, that's kind of the position I have, right? When I say that, it's not that I don't care. It's just that I don't pay attention to it because it's not important to me. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? What would you say to someone like me? Because there's going to be a whole heap of them that watch this interview that are going to be in the same position I am. What would you say to them about it?
Am I going to get hate mail?
I don't think so. I don't think so. But there will be people that watch.
So I'm not necessarily on the barricades or on my soapbox in terms of how we solve the gender pay gap. What I am more concerned about is actually having diverse representation, or having tech creators, women in businesses that are shaping our future. So tech is definitely shaping our future, and that we have more women in that. So that's kind of my juice. So I don't know what I do think that there are cases where having a quota or looking at the different kinds of jobs that we all do. I mean, my nephew and niece in Norway both went down the vocational education, so into apprenticeship. she went as a hairdresser, he went as an electrical, the people who put up the poles and things like that. The salary differences are like,
yeah, and that's massive. That's huge.
it's huge, right? But
Yeah.
they had the same level of education, just as smart as each other, but obviously he's smarter in terms of what what profession he's picked,
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't think running around and putting up massive electrical poles necessarily fits in with having kids and being a carer
right.
and a nurturer, as my niece is. But
Yeah,
and
right.
I do think that women do have that caring and nurturing more, so they will go more into those kind of roles. I think it's important for government to keep an eye on it and kind of go, okay, well, these are really, really key roles. How can we make it more sustainable, and how can we make it financially viable for people to do that, if you like?
Yeah, and that's a really good point to make, right? And and I'll clarify. Like when like I said, when I say, I don't really care, it's not that I don't care. I think it's more just the fact that like it's not something that I'm thinking about every day. So, when I hear about it, it challenges me to think, is it really a problem? I don't think it's a problem. It's not a problem for me. You know what I mean? In fact, I'm biased towards women. I hire more of them than I do men.
Yeah, but one of the other things that are in there, so it's not just the bias, but the bias in the women themselves. So what men ask for a rise, like in corporate and things like that, they'll ask for a rise every 6 months.
Okay, interesting.
Women will wait until they get offered one. And I remember a lady called Josephine Zucker. She has one of the big...
I read something about this.
Yeah, so Josephine Zucker runs... she runs a construction company in Sydney, I think, with her husband. Yeah. And then she has also been very prominent for women's rugby and all that sort of stuff. And she said she used to... And I met her many, many, many years ago. She said, like, I sometimes go and knock on the women's doors and say, are you not going to ask for a rise? Pay rise? So there is that sort of thing as well. So when I work with women in It Girls Rock, I know people like to call it IT Girls Rock. It's It Girls, the trend-setting women of the early century.
Yeah.
But when I work with women there, it's like, they say, oh, well, I don't get paid enough. I said, well, have you asked? That's one thing. I don't feel like I'm being heard. Okay, well, have you asked if you can take part in this? So it starts with yourself. We still need to fix the system, but it also starts with your own self-confidence, because the number of women that have come back to me and said, listen, I went and I asked, and you know what? Now they're listening to me. But they were probably always listening, but you couldn't hear them listening as well, right? So when you get that, one of my members, she's amazing. She used to be a scientist, and she's now a programmer or a developer, and brings her whole feminine strength self into the place. And she says, the only reason I got this job is because I applied like a man.
Hey, yes, I'm talking to you, and I know it looks like the interview, but it's actually not. We're taking a really quick, short break so that way you can hear me out. I really want you to hear me out here. If you are a business owner, you are building your personal brand. I mean, you could be anyone. You could be a real estate agent. You could be an astronaut, an IT professional. It really doesn't matter who you are and where you fit into the world. This interview is great for you. If you're really struggling to make content, and let's face it, right? When we get our phones out and we're like, taking selfies and doing videos that way, it just comes across as inauthentic. And the other side of that as well is the fact that it's just so hard to come up with ideas of what kind of content to create. And this is where our interviews absolutely bring a powerhouse and an arsenal of, basically a war chest in terms of your organic content marketing that you're creating. We create the TikToks and Reels for you. Here's the thing. I've got some great news. The great news is that this interview is completely free. We boost your SEO on Google because we go and feature these videos like the one you're watching on YouTube. And not only that, but we also give you free content to post to TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and all the rest of it as well. So if you haven't already, in the description down below is a link to Linktree, where you'll see the opportunity for you to book your very own interview and get free content for your personal brand or your business as well. I'll see you on the other side of the screen.
So she looked at the 10 requirements and she goes, normally a woman won't actually apply until she knows 12 of the 10, whereas a guy will go 4, 5, should be right, and I don't, and that's a good way of being, because you can learn the rest, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So instead of saying, "Oh, I haven't done that," I said, "I can do that. I can do that." So those are some of the things we kind of work with the women, and it's easy to say it when you're not in front of the people you're going to ask. But once you've seen that other women are having those same issues, and by the way, we actually also are about to start inviting allies into It Girls Rock as well. So we'll have the men sheds, the It boys in there as well.
Very interesting. Sign me up. Be very keen to participate and help out for sure.
Yeah, and it's really just about like having those conversations and being part of the conversations, and shifting the balance, I think.
Absolutely. Well, Gry, you know what? Like, I think we could probably go for like another hour, 2 hours. I think we could talk forever, to be honest. I think, and it's good because like on both sides, we have common opinions, and then we also have, differences in opinions. And but it's good to explore it, right? Because like both sides need to be heard and understand where it's all going. And I do think that women are underrepresented in certain industries and niches as well, including government, right? So, and I think it's important that they do have a level of input and representation in those different areas, because I mean, it's at the end of the day, like I said to you, right? I don't know. I'm not a woman, right?
Yeah.
So that exact same concept of what I'm saying when I said that to you earlier, I think it's important to talk about that, right? Because, well, how about a woman's input? Why can't they be heard and have what their wants and needs represented? And that's a good thing. I like that, So it's been a really good, productive conversation, and it's given me a little bit to think about too, right? So it's good.
I don't know if I can like sort of just throw. So it's not just about men and women. What we do, we actually look at people from, different backgrounds, different cultures. There's different genders. There's different preferences of all sorts. Age is a huge one. As a 60-year-old woman, people might not want to hire me in the tech space. I'm gonna make them, but I don't really. But I do. That there is distinct differences. So that's one of the other things that I do. I have an algorithm to measure diversity, inclusion, and belonging based around your
good
around the individual. So it's let's create that more inclusive world, that more connected world.
Absolutely. That's brilliant. Great. Listen, I think we're probably going to have to schedule in another one as well.
Yeah,
and talk with so many more things to talk about, right? So absolutely. So look, there's going to be a whole bunch of people that are going to want to reach out to you, know who you are, get to connect with you. How can they find you, Gry?
The best thing is probably to reach out to me on LinkedIn, but you can check out, and it's got a link tree to everything else that I do. For any women or men that are interested in elevating women in tech, check out itgirlsrock.global as well. On my personal site, which is grystene.rocks.
Grystene.rocks. That's a cool one. I like that. And look, guys, we're going to include all of those links in the description for the video as well. So it'll be nice and easy for you to access and know and find Gry as well. Gry, was there any final remarks before we wrapped up for today?
No, let's just all get together and celebrate differences and make sure that we see everybody for the unique selves that they are and what they bring to the world.
Which is great. And I love that. And that's, what the world needs more than that. Instead of having all these, again, differences and staying, away from each other, I think differences should come together and be coherent, which I like. I love that approach. It's really good. So, Gry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And for everyone that's listening at home, don't forget to go and like, subscribe, comment. Hey, if you've got a controversial opinion and you want to leave it in the comments, go for it. We're open to that. And that's why we talk about differences. Just as long as you're happy to have a discussion and a debate about it, right? So if you're not willing to do that and not be open-minded, then probably don't comment. We don't want that. But if you have a controversial opinion and you want to discuss it, leave that comment in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you, honestly. If you'd like to throw down your support, same thing. And don't forget to go and follow and subscribe to all of Gry's social media and connect with her as well to follow her journey if you found that this interview was empowering. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the LaunchDay Shorts podcast. We'll see you again on the next one.